Hey there guys, Mystery here, and today I want to talk about Vermintide 2. I know, right? Not Darktide for once, although I will be referencing Darktide a good bit in the video, but as you might know, Vermintide 2 is having a bit of a mini renaissance right now, a mini-sance you could say, because the game has just ended its completely free weekend where if you downloaded the game at all up until the 24th, you got to keep it forever for free, which is pretty awesome. Now, if you missed out on that sweet deal, of course, it's $1.50 right now, so not too bad either, I guess. That's 95% off, so it's definitely worth it even at that outrageous $1.50 price, and all the DLCs like half off too. I'm not here to sell it to you, but I am kind of here to sell it to you in a way, in the sense that I think this game is still really freaking good. And I think that I made some comments about this game, and I believe that it should be sunsetted in terms of its development in the near future here, and all those development resources should instead go to Darktide. I still stand by that, because this game has so much content as it currently is. Just without considering any auxiliary content like Chaos Waste, we have 35 campaign maps alone, which is crazy compared to Darktide's 20, and Darktide is a game with a lot less auxiliary content as well. So this game is swimming in content. All of its characters are done, plenty of weapons and cosmetics and all that stuff for it. So honestly, if they pull off of it now and go to Darktide instead, it's not going to move the needle, right? The players that are going to play this game are going to play this game because the core is so solid. The core is there. And that's the core that I really want to address today. I want to talk about, because when I was playing a couple of missions last night, I was reminded of the feel of Vermintide as compared to Darktide, and then I was reminded of what we have lost, what they have taken from us, men, is the stuff that made Vermintide work, because there is a shared backbone. There's a shared DNA between these games, obviously. It's the melee combat. It's the way the enemies move and you interact with the enemies, blocking, parrying, and all that sort of stuff. But so much of it these days is lost in Darktide. I feel like a couple years ago playing Darktide, I did still have a lot of that experience. And now that experience is very, very different. It's starting to take itself in a completely different direction, which, you know, I can't say I don't like, right? I still have fun playing Darktide. It is just fundamentally such a different game at this point to what it used to be, and to definitely what Vermintide 2 is. So at the core of both these games is the melee combat, right? The melee combat in Vermintide 2 is unavoidable. Even if you are playing a quote-unquote ranged character, you are going to have to pull out your melee weapon and get down and dirty with good frequency. You just cannot avoid it. There's not enough ammo to go around that you can just shoot all game. I guess Outcast Engineer, could, but even realistically, Outcast Engineer is going to pull out his melees and go to town as well. So these forced melee encounters are really like core to the gameplay experience. Every enemy needs to be able to be interacted with in melee in a meaningful way, and you need to have the skills to pay the bills, because there's not a whole lot of player power outside of just meleeing real good, right? You can occasionally pull out a bomb or use a talent or something like that, but your talents are just auxiliary to your base class. A lot of the abilities in this game are simple charges or shouts. You just like Zealot, right? And this is why I've said that I think that Zealot might be like the most balanced or easily balanced character in all of Darktide, because he's just so simple, right? He's just got a very simple I bonk thing, I get strong damage for melee sort of thing going on, and it's pretty easy to design a game around that player power. The problem that we encounter in Darktide currently is that there is such a broad spectrum in terms of player power. You know, you could have a composition that's two zealots, a veteran, and an Ogren, and then you could have a composition that's running a flame staff psyker and whatever else, right? Just even including a flame staff psyker hugely tips the scales, and there are certain builds and even just individual weapons in Darktide that completely invalidate huge swaths of enemies that make just dealing with encounters completely trivial. There's nothing like that in Vermintide 2. Vermintide 2, the player's bounds of power are much more constrained. You can be much less useless. Like even the worst talent choices and the worst weapon choices are gonna still leave you with a better power structure than if you did the same in Darktide. And at the top end, the really outrageous outliers in power are not outrageous at all. There are certainly more powerful classes and more powerful weapons. You know, like Warrior Priest is an incredibly powerful class, but nothing that's going to make you just like completely trivialize the game as it is in its entirety. And that is what enables the game director and the devs to send the appropriate threats at you. And this is where Darktide, sorry, I guess I could start with from the Darktide angle here. This is where Darktide really fails these days, is that the game just simply cannot send an appropriate threat at every team. You know, you've encountered this a lot if you play higher difficulties. An appropriate threat for a team with the flame staff is a completely inappropriate threat for a team without the flame staff or the force greatsword or chorus or shout or whatever it is, right? Try playing a game with 2 charge zealots and 2 charge ogrins, right? Good luck, right? Many players could not clear anywhere near the difficulty they're clearing without those tools that otherwise just invalidate lots and lots of parts of the challenge of the game. And I think that's fine, those exist. It's just really hard to balance encounters around that. Versus in Vermintide 2, even a player who has the mechanical skill that I have retained over this last decade since I haven't played it, I still find myself being very challenged by the encounters. The mid encounters and the final encounters are hectic. They know exactly how many enemies they need to send to put a strain on your ability to hack through all of them and to use your resources wisely. There is a limit to what characters can do, and therefore they can push right up against that limit and they can give you a life and death situation. So oftentimes in Vermintide 2, encounters like the mid and end game encounters are the craziest parts of the level. And that's because in those encounters, they throw exactly enough at you to the point where it's either you are going to survive just barely or you're going to die trying. And that feels good. Versus when we think about Darktide encounters, I can't remember the last time an encounter was the actual place where I was getting stuck in a mission. It was usually just like on the road to an encounter in some random ass room somewhere when something spawned. Because it's just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Is this enough? I don't know. What about this? So in that sense, Vermintide 2 is absolutely superior because we can just get these encounters that are just so much more appropriate for the challenge rating of the map that you're supposed to be playing. And I felt that even last night where I was like, okay, I mean, you'll see in a lot of this footage here, I'm fighting on the edge of life and death. Of course, I'm playing Zealot, but like I'm able to avoid every single one of these attacks, and I just need to keep my head on a swivel and keep my mechanics tight, and that feels good. Pivoting to Darktide again, Darktide also loses on this front where the melee formula has just completely broken down. The melee formula in Darktide is unraveled because, first of all, there's a lot of classes that do not even need a melee at all. They can just go through the game and probably pull out their melee once or twice. And also, the way that you engage with enemies in melee in Vermintide is fundamentally different. As you can see here, each of these enemies is like perceivable. They are distinct. There are enough enemies on the map to threaten me from multiple different angles, but there's not so many that I can't actually tell what the fuck I'm fighting, and I'm just swinging at it blindly instead. So much of Darktide comes down to, okay, there's a melee horde. I'm going to wide slash at this until all the little stuff is gone, and then I'm going to do heavy strikes on the big stuff that's not dead yet. Or I just need to be heavy striking and backstepping constantly because I've got about 6 big guys who are just chasing my ass down. In this, you'll notice that the hordes are some guys with like little shields and some guys that are a little bit bigger, and the big chaos warriors in here occasionally. A single chaos warrior is actually a challenge in this game, especially the shield guys. They have a lot of health. They take, even for me, a melee focused character that is supposed to be punching through these guys, they take a good number of hits, like 5 hits or so, to put down with headshots. So these enemies can last a lot of punishment, and they can deal a lot of punishment themselves. Compare this to the Crushers in Darktide, where even with a 6,500 health change from a 3,500 health starting point, they are still getting knocked over in 1 or 2 hits by a lot of classes. And this is this is outrageous to the point where how do you balance that? Because if you're using a weapon that can't kill crushers and they double their health, well, now you're fucked. And that is something that they don't have a problem with really in Vermintide 2, because the crushers, or their crusher equivalent, the chaos warriors, are designed to be challenging for all builds, and they really are. And the problem we have is that the horde size has to be accommodated for in Darktide, and then when you end up with, instead of fighting individual enemies, that you can be like, oh, this is a 1v4, it's a 1v5, and I have to like pivot backwards and dodge and then block this attack and then push, stab, and sweep to get these enemies to stop attacking me. That is all gone. Instead, you just get your distance from these enemies. You don't let them close enough so that they can actually hurt you, and you deal with them as if they're one massive blob of enemies that may or may not be attacking you at any second. Or more appropriately, for a lot of the classes, you just keep your distance entirely and throw grenades, or wait until you can stagger them with an ability and then put them on the ground and follow up and kill them when they can't even retaliate. And that removes this very, very enjoyable part of the game, which is that when you are in melee combat, the enemy should take turns with you attacking. You should attack them, they should get to attack back at you, you dodge or you block or you parry, and then you attack back, and they attack back at you, and then you attack back and you kill them, right? In Vermintide, or that is very much the case, especially with Chaos Warriors, even Storm Vermin and Maulers, you'll see a lot of that. But in Darktide, most enemies are dying before they get to do anything. They're getting blown up by a single hit. They're getting blown up before they can even get within melee range. If you're a melee character, you are killing everything short of like crushers near instantaneously, and even those crushers are going down too quickly. So I don't genuinely know where things went astray. And I also am going to say here that I don't think that either one of these games is right necessarily. I think Darktide is a fun game. It's just not the game that Vermintide was and is. And so if you enjoy, this is the closing of my thesis and the closing of my statement here. If you enjoy that core melee focus, that feeling of engaging with every enemy with melee in a meaningful way, you absolutely should play Vermintide 2, especially if you've never played it. Go try it out. It is still a really, really good game and has a lot to offer. And I'm hoping that it can bring some of its very cool level design and stuff over into Darktide in the future. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about it for today, guys. Well, if you want to see more Vermintide content from me on the channel, let me know. I did enjoy playing it for a couple hours, and yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.